It's a pleasure for me to be here. My presentation is a two-part presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Panama Canal Expansion Program, how we built it, and then I'll talk a little bit about our performance in the last 3 years. So the first thing we did was planning, definition, and preparation. The expansion program, in order for us to build that project, we had to go to a national referendum that was stated by the law once the canal was reverted to Panama. So we embarked in a long project so people could understand what we were going to do when they went to go vote. So it took 5 years. We did over 120 studies. $40 million were invested. And we did a couple of physical models in France. One to prove that the filling and emptying system of the locks was successful, the one we were planning to build, and also to see how this would affect the ships, so the pilots would feel comfortable, and I'll explain why we did all that in a few minutes. So the intent was to go from a 5,000 TEU vessel to a 14,000 TEU vessel. We talk about containers. And those are the maximum dimensions that we anticipated originally. Actually, it was 49 meters, the maximum beam we were going to anticipate, and 366 meters in length. Why did we do this project? We needed to increase capacity for the Panama Canal. We had reached maximum capacity by 2014. It was forecasted. So we also were kind of a little bit behind the curve on the size of vessels that were being built worldwide. So we wanted to bring not only more ships, but bigger ships. So the main differences between the original locks that were built in 1914 and the new ones is that we have a lateral filling system. That's why it was so important for us to test the system, make sure this is a symmetrical, smooth flow. The existing locks from 1914 have a bottom fill system, so it's very symmetrical. We also did rolling gates, because we only have one lane. And the rolling gates, you can actually do maintenance within the recess. You don't need to float them out. The original locks have miter gates. You actually need to bring a floating crane, float them, ship them out to a shipyard for maintenance. We have 2 lanes, so you can put one out for maintenance while the other one is in operation. So we have duplicate gates. We're going to use tugboats instead of locomotives. That was why we did the physical model for the small vessels, so the pilots would feel comfortable. They wouldn't have locomotives holding or positioning the vessel in the chambers. We were going to work with locomotives. And we also put water-saving basins. So the Panama Canal works with fresh water. We wanted to recycle some of that water. We embarked on a loan. We had a $2.3 billion loan with 5 multilateral banks, and we were able to sign one single contract with all 5 of them. It was a 20-year loan with a 10-year grace period and 10-year payback. We're starting to pay that this year. We started last year with $115 million, so we go to $230 million starting this year. Project management was key. Even though we had operated a canal for over 100 years, we had not built one. So we hired a company, program management firm, to assist us with the program management, and it was an embedded team within the Panama Canal. It was about 46 people that came. CH2M Hill was the company that got the contract awarded. And the idea was that they would mentor us, and as we were acquiring the skills, they would fade out. We still have about 5 CH2M Hill people working with us on the claims resolution process. We also make a program management information system. It was the first thing we did. So it would be a uniform reporting on all the different phases of the project, and I will show you the reason why we needed to be very standardized. So we also did that. We also created a small Panama Canal Commission within the Panama Canal. Basically, only one vice presidency took all the decisions in environment, safety, finance, budget, legal, because the Panama Canal were 10,000 employees. You had to run the canal to make sure we could pay for part of the project, and you had to build the project simultaneously. So we actually moved it, so decision-making was done fast. It was a $5.2 billion project to be built in 7 years. So these are the components of the project. This is the map of Panama. The yellow line is a navigational channel, and we had to make it wider and deeper. We had to widen the Atlantic entrance, Pacific entrance, and the whole lake. We had to build a brand new set of locks. We had to make a brand new access channel to bypass an existing lake, and I'll show you that in a minute. And we split it in 4 different contracts. And of course, we wanted to operate the lake at a higher level, so we also had to do small modifications to existing infrastructure along the lake to be able to do this. Dredging works, basically we split it in 3 contracts, if you want to call one of them contract. We awarded one to a Belgian company, Jan de Nul, in the Atlantic side. They remove 17.6 million cubic meters. We awarded one in the Pacific side to another Belgian company, Dredging International, and they removed 8.7 million cubic meters. And most of the dredging, it was done by the Panama Canal. We, at the time, owned 4 dredges. We have 2 right now. We accessed 2 this year. And we dredged 25.2 million cubic meters of dredged material. The new Pacific access channel that we had to build, basically in this picture you see on the top part where it says PAC 1, 2, 3, and 4, that was all land. And on the bottom part we have Miraflores Lake. The difference between the new locks and the existing Pacific locks, between the 2 lakes is going to be 9 meters. So one lake is 9 meters higher than the other. So we had to do a new excavation and a 2.3 kilometer dam to be able to keep the 2 waters separated. So it was awarded to 4 different contracts. One of them was to a Panamanian company, one of them was to a company from Costa Rica, one of them was to a company from Mexico, and the other one was a consortium from Mexico, Costa Rica, and Spain. The area you see shaded in red is when the US had presence in Panama and they had military bases, they used this as a shooting range. So it was areas that were contaminated with munition and explosive of concern. So we had to clear 580 hectares. And we actually used that area as disposal site because it was right next to the navigational channel that we had to build. So we cleared 1 meter of land. We destroyed all of the ammunitions that were found, and then we put about 5 meters of excavated material on top. This is the dam that we had to build, 2.3 kilometers long. You can see on the right, we had to build a coffer dam to be able to do the excavation and the construction of the dam in the dry. And this project was delayed 2 years. The reason was it was delayed 2 years. You see on the bottom of the picture, we have a concrete wall and a grab carton. The condition of the ground was so fractured that it took a lot more material and time to be able to seal this so the dam would perform correctly. So you can see here on the left, you can see in the middle picture a small truck depositing the filters. So you can see the magnitude of filters that were used to build the dam. On the left, it was clay. All the material was found within the area of the project. And on the right, you can see the grout curtain, how close the patterns were to be able to do the seal. So even though this project was delayed 2 years because the construction of the locks was delayed 1.5 years, everything was finished within time. And that's what it looked like before and then filled up. You can see on your left the existing 1914 canal, and those are Pedro Miguel locks. And you can see the body of water on the right is 9 meters higher than the body of water to your left. We had to fill slowly so we could do testing that the dam would perform correctly. It was 1 meter per 27 days, and once it was proved that it worked, then we removed the plug and we joined the lake to the new navigational channel. And that's what it looks like today. You can see a Panamax vessel on your left going into Pedro Miguel locks, actually 2, and Neo-Panamax on the right. The new vessels coming through the new locks are called Neo-Panamax because there's still some post-Panamax vessels in the industry that will not fit the new locks. But we knew that from the beginning. It wasn't built for every single ship because not every single ship will use our route. So the locks was by far the biggest and the hardest project. The most relevant terms of the contract were that because it was a long-term project, we identified the 5 key elements that could impact the contractor. So we had a cost escalation clause for concrete, reinforcing steel, structural steel, labor, and fuel. According to industry standards, and if it was higher than the day we awarded the project, the contractor would be reimbursed the difference, and if it was lower, then we would get a credit for the project. We also had a stipend of $15 million, so the pre-qualified consortia that did not get the contract awarded would get some money back from the money they had to put in to prepare a bid. So the $50 million was split between the non-winners, but the proposal would belong to the Panama Canal. If they did not want to give us their proposal, then they wouldn't receive the money. And we also had a value engineering clause, which allowed the contractor to suggest improvements, and then we would split 50-50, either the cost benefits or the time benefit. 4 pre-qualified consortia were pre-qualified. Canal, Atlántico Pacífico de Panamá, Bechtel Taisei Mitsubishi Corporation, and Grupo Unidos por el Canal, which was the awarding consortia. We also pre-qualified the designer of record and the gate fabricators because they were key elements of the project. So at the end of the day, we received 3 proposals out of the 4 pre-qualified contractors. We had a 14-month period for the proposals to be presented, and in those 14 months, we actually had one-on-one meetings with each of the consortia to get their feedback on what the contract that was going to go out was saying, and if we saw similar commentaries on the different consortia, we would make improvements to the terms of reference. The design was basically done all over the world. The gates were designed and built in Korea. The main contractor, designer contractor, was from US, Montgomery Watson Harsa. A lot of the design was done also in Panama. We did physical models in France and in Argentina. All of the reinforcing steel came from Mexico. Spain did most of the control system. Netherlands designed the gates, and Italy built the gates. Here's some of the pictures of the construction site. This is the recess where the gates go. You can see the amount of steel that we use, and on the right is the tunnels underneath the floor of the locks that divert the water for the filling and empty system, so we would have a symmetrical flow. This is our Clara Locks. This is in the Atlantic side. If you went to the locks today, they look identical, but they were built very differently because the type of soil we have in the Atlantic side is very soft, so it's very easy to excavate and to form. Not very good with rain, but they were very successful with it. In the Pacific side, this is again Atlantic. You can see there the amount of cranes that we had simultaneously at one point in time. In the Pacific side, it was all rock, so we had to do everything with drilling and blasting, so very, very different construction methodologies. I would say the Pacific locks was a little bit more complicated because of the drilling and blasting. This was also an innovation, the filling and emptying system. Basically, we recycle 60% of the water that is used in each transit. We recycle it for the next transit, and 2/5 come from the lake. This is the picture of the site of the project. The Americans did try to build a 3rd set of locks in 1939, and they stopped the project in 1942 because of the war. And this is the site where they had started the excavation. So that small lake-looking thing you see there is the actual excavations that were abandoned for 60 years. This is when the contractor came to work. In the Atlantic side, we actually used the same alignment. You can see here those advance or the progress of the works. That's what it looked like on June 2016 when we inaugurated. And in the Pacific side, they also started the excavations that were abandoned, and the alignment was not the right one because they were going to go into Miraflores Lake, so we actually used the 1939 excavations to do the water-saving basins, and then we created a brand new channel next to it. Challenges, we had many. I said never a dull moment. There was not a day that it wasn't a challenge to be resolved. But the biggest challenges we had actually a labor stoppage on the contractor's side for 2 weeks. He suspended the works, demanding $1 billion on claims that he said if we didn't give him the money, he wouldn't restart the work. So after 2 weeks of conversations, they restarted the work. We had a 3-stage process in the contract to resolve claims. One was the employer representative would analyze the claim to see if it had merit or not. If the contractor wasn't satisfied, he could go to a dispute adjudication board. Their decision was binding. But it wasn't the final stage. If either party wasn't happy with the decision, had 28 days to send the notice of dissatisfaction, and then we could go to arbitration. So we said you had a process from the beginning. This strike happened in 2014. The contractor was a contract award in 2009. So if you had any complaints, you should have voiced them at the moment. They were having cost overruns, but not necessarily due to the Panama Canal. We also had a seepage. This was one of the tests. We had several tests for the project. We had $200 million on penalties. If the gates wouldn't open or close within 5 minutes, if the water saving mills wouldn't fill or empty within 17 minutes, they had penalties up to $200 million. So this was one of the tests. We also needed to test, even though we're never intending to dry dock this or empty these chambers, we wanted to know if we could dry them in case we needed. So this seepage, these cracks on the concrete seal on one of you had a gate full of water on one side, full head, and no water in the other one, and we had these cracks. It was a design error, and they actually had to go back and reinforce all of the seals. So this delayed also 4 months of the project. We also rented a boat So our pilots could practice with a tugboat instead of the locomotives, passing vessels through for 2 months. Environmental was also a big part of the project. We reforested twice as many hectares as we deforested across different national parks. We also had wildlife rescue. We signed a contract with the Smithsonian for 5 years and $1 million, where they were able to do a lot of research in those areas that had never been excavated before. And we also had an archaeologist on site, which found over 2,000 artifacts that were recovered. Accountability, it was huge. This is a project where we went to a national referendum. We had to make reports to our advisory board, a board of directors, the government, the president, the cabinet, Congress. So that was very important that everything was very well reported. We did certify 75 engineers as project managers, and we trained about 300 of them, so everybody could do the same methodology of the PMI. We had over 80 different nationalities working in the project, so I would say when people tell me what's the hardest part of the project, I would say people, not the engineering, actually. Dealing with people can be complicated, especially if you have different companies of different cultures. And then we had the big inauguration. Costco Shipping Panama was the first vessel. So what have we done to date? Over 7,194 transits we have through the new locks. Container vessels are by far our biggest client and revenue. LPG, number 2, and LNG, number 3. We had never envisioned LNG when we designed the project. That's something that came about later. Liquid bulk, car carriers, passengers, and others. And then this fiscal year, 2,693 transits. Same trend. Lessons learned, very important. People, process, and tools in that order. Like I told you, people, people, people. Promotion and marketing of the project, we had an info conference that about 384 companies went to Panama before we put each contract out to bid. Total transparency and imaging of the bidding process. We didn't have any people complaining about the award. Early involvement of the project management team. The people that work in the planning is the people that work during the construction. Integrate the roles of project manager and contracting officer, which we didn't used to have in the canal. Management team, since the development stage of the specifications of the bidding contract, that's helping us a lot with the claims process. Allow enough time to the contractors to bid, like I mentioned, the 14 months. Contractors must have clear and precise agreements about their roles, responsibilities, and organization prior to delivery of the proposals. We found that many contractors that were consortia didn't have that between themselves or did not expect us to reinforce the contract. And consortia with many members represent considerable challenges for the projects, especially if they have never worked together before, which was the case with our main contractor. 4 companies, 4 countries, never worked together before, very challenging. Integrations of experts in the management team, aware diversity of corporate cultures, languages, nationalities. Team integration is crucial. We didn't do a partnering. That's something I would recommend, to do a partnering with a contractor when you first start the project. In design construction projects, the designer must be part of the consortia, not just a subcontractor. That was very problematic also. Constant communication with interest group, and the project manager must delegate, but should always be aware of details. Contractor friends must prepare accurate estimates. When we told the contractor, you're having some difficulties because your estimates were not so sound, they didn't anticipate a lot of the temporary works to be so expensive, like the roads they had to build for the gates and other things. Use the stipend. If you have a stipend, invest it. Timely submittal is very important also. A contractor wanted to submit things later on and get going with the works, and that was not allowed. And expect that owners will enforce full compliance with safety, quality, and environmental requirements. Now for our business, Canal Performance. Who are we? We are the hub of the Americas. We have over 144 trade routes. Vessels that transit through the canal go to 1,700 different ports in the world in 160 different countries. We also have an air hub with 86 direct destinations in America and Europe in 38 different countries. Asia unites the east coast of the United States, and Asia is our main route. It's the most important route that we have, the one that gives us the most revenue. But we also are a regional market for South America. 80% of the vessels that transit the Panama Canal do touch a local port. This is the reason why we expanded the canal. You could see that the transits were leveling off, but the tonnage was increasing because the vessels were increasing. So that was very critical for us. The amount of transits has remained relatively stable, but we're definitely putting a lot more cargo through. And this is, again, another view of our market segment. Container, liquid bulk, like I said, LNG, it's picked up a lot. We didn't anticipate that. Dry bulk, which used to be a good market for us. You can see there the green of liquid bulk lower than the dry bulk has lowered. You have competition from other places. And also the crisis between the US and China has not helped the dry bulk market. These are our main users: United States #1, China #2, Mexico #3, Chile, Japan, and Peru. Those are our biggest clients, Colombia also. And the main routes that we have is Asia, US coast is the #1 route. We have South America, West Coast to the US East Coast. We have Central America, West Coast to US East Coast, South America, West Coast to Europe, and South America, coast to coast. Liner service, we have 11 Panamax vessels, liner service, and 16 Neo-Panamax, so total of 27. And we also have port feeder services. Our containers vessels have gone from an average of 3,000 to about 9,000 TEUs, with the biggest vessel being 15,000 TEUs, which is larger than we anticipated when we analyzed the project. Grains export, like I said, the relationships between China and USA have decreased our market in that share. But also, there's a big competition from Brazil and Argentina. They're producing a lot of soybean that is being now purchased by China. And they, of course, don't need to use our route. It will be more expensive farther away. LPG flows, USA, Asia, Japan, South Korea, Ecuador, Chile, Mexico, Singapore, Australia, and others are the main purchasers of the LPG. And also Trinidad Tobago sends, and now it's mainly sending to also China to make up for the market that US is not providing to China on LPG. LNG, same. You can see here how the Panama Canal has increased the amount of LPG that is going through the canal. The other routes is the red line. Our route is the blue line. So you can see that how we picked up since we opened up the new Panama Canal, because we allow now much larger vessels than before. LNG, exactly the same thing. You can see there China used to be the #2. Now China is #5. And we have Panama because now we have an LNG plant in Panama that is consuming a lot of LNG also, storage we're receiving. So you have Peru going to Europe. So these are our routes for LNG. Again, you can see the world LNG movements and what's been captured by the Panama Canal in the blue line. Tonnage, we have increased tonnage and we have increased revenues at 28% in revenues since 2006 when we inaugurated the canal. Transits 3.7, like I said, not very much, but what counts here is the tonnage, 39.7% increase in tonnage going through the canal, and we're operating at about 70% capacity, so we still have more to grow. Neo-Panamax revenues, 44% of the canal now, and 56 the Panamax, the original canal. That was in 2018. In 2019 has increased to 49.1. So, and like I said, we still have room to grow. We have been able to pass 12 Neo-Panamax per day. The maximum capacity was, by design, was 12. We cannot do 12 sustainably yet, but that's the intent. That's what we expect to do. We have broken some records that we originally anticipated. We didn't think we would be able to pass a Q-Flex LNG, and we have done it. So we know we can pass these kind of vessels. Now we were expecting it would be a smaller one. We also, like I mentioned you, 366 meters in length. We have passed the Triton, which is 369 meters in length. So we did this as a trial, but now we can receive these type of vessels, containers. And this was the total record of the highest paid toll in the new locks, $1.2 million. This is the Thalassa Elpida. It's an evergreen vessel. So if there are any questions.
So, well, where do you think the canal's going in the future? You going to widen it some more? That's my question.
No. No, there's still not a market for that. We did analyze a 4 set of locks. There would be demand for 4 vessels per day. That doesn't pay for the project.
How about the 23,000 TEU vessels we see coming online?
There's not that many. There's still enough of the other ones. We can pass about 94% of the world fleet right now through the locks. So if we decrease a little bit, it'll be okay.
Any other questions? Anybody else have a question? You see the pink hard hat, ladies? A woman can do this job too. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.